right. It's great to be here. Exciting for me to get to hear all the different conversations and things that are going around.
This should be reverse the red. Reverse the red.
Yeah, we could pull up the other presentation. Reverse the red. It's the second speaker.
I mean, that one wasn't my presentation, but that could be fun to just see what happens. No, I'll chat a little bit. So just want to briefly talk about kind of biodiversity as really one of our strongest indicators of ecosystem health. The biodiversity that exists in a space is one of those things that I think we all kind of naturally know that is true, but how do we measure it? How do we strategically approach it and actually make a positive difference? So the first thing I'll say, being here in Texas and having a lot of people at this conference ask me, reverse the red has nothing to do with blue or red politics or communism. Just things I've heard this morning. The other thing is, has anybody gone to the Dallas Zoo or Fort Worth Zoo and you see the sign that says critically endangered, endangered, vulnerable? Okay, that is the IUCN Red List. So that is a global standard that explains the risk of extinction for species. So it's a scientifically based piece, and that's what we are named after. So we are a coalition set up to reverse the trends of that red list. So at the end of the day, we want to see species better off tomorrow than they are now. So this is, there we go. Okay, nothing that's going to shock anybody here, but we are currently on a biodiversity loss trend. And one thing that has taken place in the last couple of years is that 196 countries have agreed to something called the Global Biodiversity Framework. Ultimately, it is a plan to restore biodiversity on the planet. What it calls for is to put certain actions in place by the year 2030 to halt that loss, with the intention to then start to return it and restore it towards 2050. So that's the goal. What's important to know is that 196 countries have agreed to this, and there's actually massive international funding mechanisms put in place to do this. Now, that includes everything from 30% of protected areas, lands, both terrestrial and aquatic. It includes things like human-wildlife conflict and coexistence, and it also includes things like recovering species. So this is really what we exist to do, and I want to start with good news. The good news is that we actually do know how to restore and recover species. We've got the science, technology, wisdom, connections, experience on how to do it. The challenge is, can we do it at pace and scale? So I want to tell this quick little story of this adorable little guy. So this is from Australia. This is the grassland earless dragon. So if you've ever wondered, or if your kids think dragons are real, they are. It's these guys. This is an adorable little guy that was thought to be extinct for almost 50 years in Australia. There was a housing development project that went in place, and they happened to find some. So going from extinct in the wild to they did still exist, and very quickly, so in a matter of about 9 months, government and civil society partners came together. They found recovery sites for these. They worked with a group that has hound dogs, trained them how to find the little tiny holes they live in the grasslands using scent. So these dogs went out and actually found all the nest sites. These guys would, like 3 of them would fit in my hand. They're tiny, so they're very, very small. They found those sites. They got a number of them. I believe they were able to recover about a dozen or so using the Australian Zoo Association. Within 9 months, they had propagated them and had almost 100 ready for re-release. The government secured new release sites. And this is one of those optimistic stories where they actually worked with the developers, because if you can imagine, the developers weren't ecstatic that their project got stalled. I don't know why they would be so upset. Yes, joking, of course. But what they were able to do is, by actually putting these dragons back in 3 new sites, it allowed them to downgrade the endangered species status so they could actually continue their development project and ensure that the dragons were actually better off. So it was a really interesting little pairing, and I believe there was even funding that came from the developers to help. But the reason I tell this story is it's well-coordinated strategic action in a matter of 9 months, which is lightning fast for what we normally do. Usually we all kind of work in random places and random actions. So for us, what we look at when it comes to biodiversity is that we need strategic alignment. There's often a gap between kind of national level efforts or government efforts with those that are actually doing the work, right? There's tons of organizations doing amazing work, but it's often not strategically aligned. The second is one of the great things about biodiversity is it's actually very measurable and very achievable. So all of these other topics we've talked about today, water and land and community, are hugely important and really big and messy. A great thing about biodiversity is it's actually pretty achievable and it's pretty straightforward. Not that it's easy, don't hear that wrong, but that we do know how to measure it. So we can get rapid actions and rapid outcomes. And then the last is that amplification and connectivity is how do we link together? And kind of like what was being said before with the wetlands, we actually know how to do this. So it's a matter of putting the right people in the right place to advance it. The other thing to kind of make a little bit of a note, so this has to do with the global biodiversity framework that I was referencing earlier. Make sure we're on the right spot there. So even if we hit 30% of our protected areas, terrestrially and from a marine system, 57% of known threatened species are still at risk of extinction. They need some sort of additional help. So that might mean that their population is so small that they need additional breeding support, or they need nest boxes, or they need wildlife corridors. There was some comment to that. So just doing land protection is not enough for almost 2/3 of species that we're aware of. Again, the great thing about that is we know how to do it, but it's a matter of strategically aligning this work so that biodiversity can restore and thrive. So across the world, Reverse the Red's really fortunate. We have about 22,000 partners in 176 countries. And so we have been working with countries to create a strategic plan. How do we deliver what's called Target 4 by 2030? So that means actions in place for species that need it the most by 2030. That's the target, right? And I'm not going to go through this very much because there's a lot of detail, but you can get a sense of which species need it, how do we map who's doing what. That gives us a gap analysis, identify where our capacities are, and start to mobilize on that. And one of our kind of examples of this is actually in Nigeria. So this is starting to happen at whole country scale, mobilizing an entire country's worth of people to put proper and strategic actions in place. So for them, it comes down to 115 species. As of last month, 24 of them already had the right actions in place. So that gives you your gap. They're able to use the red list, that same thing, critically endangered, endangered. They're able to use that as a baseline to track progress. And then we're able to mobilize different groups to do it. And an opportunity that I wanted to make sure everybody in this room was aware of was Chris Corpus, who's over here, heard a presentation that I was giving talking about this and said, we could do this in North Texas. We're bigger than most countries on the planet, which is true. And so there's been a group, and actually if a handful want to raise their hand that have been a part of this, have been discussing what it would be like to take this same process and apply it to North Texas. How do we mobilize clear, measurable, strategic action quickly for the species that need it most? And again, it's back to the first statement. Biodiversity is our best indicator for the health of our ecosystem. So if we can put actions in the place where it'll have the clearest ROI, the fastest return on biodiversity restoration, the quickest, that seems like a smart play. So we've been talking about that, and I do want to give a kind of a shout out. When you're in it, it's hard to know this, but for me, I'm fortunate to work with a lot of countries. Your Texas State Wildlife Action Plan is fantastic. It is very well detailed, it is very well done, and for many of the species, the exact actions needed are already done. You just need somebody to implement the action, right? Again, I know it's not easy, but the right steps are there. And this is an asset that so many countries don't even have anything close to it. So you're already 10 steps ahead in so many ways. So just want to both say kudos to anybody in the room who worked on this or contributed, as well as please pay attention to it. And then I want to just give a last couple of examples here. So Singapore, as a city-state, was really created as a city in nature. And they've done a lot of what these ideas we're talking about, is they've integrated city planning, they've integrated water management, they've integrated green spaces, biodiversity restoration into the fabric of their city. And we were just talking about it earlier. The very first time I came to Dallas, I was genuinely surprised that it was so green. I had only been to Houston before. I I like Dallas better. So if you're from Houston, sorry, but I assumed Dallas would look like Houston, and it didn't. So it was really quite green and beautiful, and I didn't know how much work goes into the green spaces here. But there's other models to look at to see how they're doing this at pretty rapid innovation and rapid scale as well. And then another one, again, just examples of people doing this. So in Germany, there was, you can see some of the stats, but they had found, I think the total number was about 900 threatened plant species that were native to Germany. And they went out to say, how do we save these? And it was actually local gardening clubs that stepped forward and said, you know what, we could do this. We could save these. And they found very quickly that, like the stat there, 321 of these were already commercially propagated. So it was just a matter of teaching people in these German communities, hey, instead of planting this that comes from, whatever, East Asia, plant this. This comes from here. And they were able to genuinely make measurable difference on so many endangered species by just working with gardening clubs. And then one other that I'd throw in that I don't have a slide on, but in Australia, there's been some development, same thing, massive growth of cities. And so they've put in regulation where every so many square kilometers, they have to build in wildlife corridors. Because as the cities have expanded, they've actually encapsulated their national parks. But now what you have is communities that just have kangaroos that hop by, and you have wallabies that go by, and echidnas that bury under. And it was just built into how they develop. And there's some really cool models that, again, we don't have to start from scratch. So I'll just throw this up here. Again, in particular, if you have any interest in being a part of the group that's working on this North Texas Species Restoration Initiative, this is my contact, and you can drop it in here and talk to me or anybody else locally. But I'll stop there on biodiversity stuff.
Fantastic. Okay, we have time for a couple of questions for Michael. So if you just want to raise your hand, we'll pass the microphone to you. All right here in the front.
Hello, my name is Matthew Orwatt. I'm the Ag and Natural Resource Agent for Texas AgriLife for Dallas County. And I was wondering if you've heard of, I'm an advisor for the North Texas Master Naturalist, and have you ever heard of the City Nature Challenge and iNaturalist on the app, where the different, for example, DFW is going to participate, and we usually rank pretty high on that. And documenting those species can find the locations and the distribution of endangered species in North Texas. So it's really, if anyone has not gone there to look at that on the website, which is much more useful than the app for looking at things, the app is great for identification. I would encourage it.
That's awesome. Love it. And yes, and one piece about biodiversity too, like work on water, which is critically important, and all these other things. It's hard for the average citizen to get involved. Biodiversity, you can get the average citizen involved, whether it's birders or it's people taking photos of things that they find around in parks near them. So species, especially animals, people they're happy, they're excited about that. It's kind of one of the easier places to mobilize individuals. So I love that you guys are doing that. I hope you're number one this next time around. So I expect you to deliver that. There you go, okay.
All right, one more question right here in the front. David, right over here.
More of a comment than a question. I feel like I'm loud enough, but I guess
No,
I'm
you're
not.
good.
Hi, I work with the Wildlife Conservation Society, WCS out of the Bronx Zoo in New York, and a lot of WCS's work is all around this species survival plan and the wildlife corridors. And I just wanted to say I love hearing what you're doing, and I write a ton of curriculum, and I'm teaching teachers throughout New York City and now nationwide. And I would love to include some of your website and some of the stuff that you're doing into the classwork, into the courses that I'm writing. So I hope that will bring a lot more teachers to, and a lot more educators to your doorstep.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely,
a lot more
it's awesome.
support.
Use it.
Okay.
All right, please join me in thanking Michael Clifford for that presentation.